The Philadelphia 76ers are significantly better than we thought. Going into the playoffs, I thought the Sixers had a bunch of different issues. I thought one of their main players in James Harden wasn't playing nearly as well as he was in the past. I thought the Sixers roster had a couple of different issues with it that didn't allow the Sixers to be all that consistent, and overall I just thought it would be very difficult for the Sixers to be very successful in the playoffs. I expected them to have some success, like making it out of the first round, but I thought if they were to go up against a really difficult opponent in the second round, they would struggle, and I didn't necessarily think they would be able to win that matchup. But when you look at where the Sixers are currently, not only were they able to make it out of the first round and sweep, but in the second round matchup against the Celtics, not only is it competitive, but they're also leading the series. So at this point, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of the issues that I had with the Sixers going into the playoffs just really haven't come into fruition. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. When the Sixers originally traded for James Harden, I actually liked the move. Although Harden didn't necessarily have the best ending with the Brooklyn Nets, I thought with the Sixers it would be a much better situation for him. Because not only would he want to be with the Sixers, that was a team he told Brooklyn he wanted to go to, but also when you look at the fit between him and Embiid, I thought it was absolutely perfect. I thought the pick and roll / pick and pop between those two guys would be absolutely deadly and a real problem for the rest of the league. But once Harden actually got to the Sixers, he had a handful of pretty good games, but overall he just didn't look like the same James Harden that we were used to. There were a bunch of games where he was really inefficient, there were a bunch of games that he didn't even look to score for himself, and overall it was pretty clear that Harden just was not the same guy that he was in the past. And at that point, it was made pretty clear that once it came down to the playoffs, if Harden didn't play nearly as well as he did in the past, it would be very difficult for the Sixers to do anything in the playoffs. Of course, they could make it past the first round relatively easily, but going forward from there, it would be really difficult to be successful. And that's basically what happened in the playoffs. The Sixers were able to make it past the first round, but they weren't really able to have all that much success after that, in part due to the poor play of James Harden. And after those playoffs were over, a lot of people thought James Harden was done. And fast forwarding to this season, during the regular season at least, that's really what we saw from Harden. We saw a guy who of course had the ability to go off at points, but for the most part throughout the regular season, Harden was either relatively inefficient or there were certain games where he even didn't look to score out there at all, and he was only looking to be a facilitator out there, which just made him somewhat of an ineffective star. A guy who clearly had the name and clearly had the star power, but when you watched him out there, he didn't nearly live up to those expectations. And going into this year's playoffs, once again, people thought they could make it past the first round relatively easily, but going forward from there, they thought it would be very difficult for the Sixers to be all that successful when your guy who's supposed to be your number 2 star wasn't playing all that well and clearly wasn't living up to the James Harden name. But in the first round of the playoffs versus the Brooklyn Nets, not only were the Sixers as a team able to play really well, but James Harden individually was also able to play pretty well, and the Sixers were able to sweep the Nets in only 4 games. But although that matchup was very impressive for the Sixers, everybody expected them to beat the Nets. So going forward to the next matchup against the Boston Celtics, I would say the majority of the people had the Boston Celtics winning that series. And especially after the first 2 games where the Celtics were able to split on the road, even more people expected the Celtics to win that matchup. But fast forwarding a couple games to the point where we're at today, where the Sixers are currently up 3-2 going back into Philadelphia for game 6, I think the Sixers are in a great spot, and I think it's pretty clear that the Sixers are much better than we thought, including myself. But the question at this point is, why are the Sixers playing so well in the series versus Boston? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the main factor is clearly the play of James Harden. I mentioned the lack of playoff success in the past and the lack of success during the regular season in the past for the Sixers, and the main reason for that was always due to the lack of great play from James Harden. But when you look at this playoff series versus Celtics so far, Harden has been a huge reason for why they've been playing so well. Of course, there have been a game or two where he hasn't played all that well, but overall when you looked at his play, he has looked like vintage James Harden. He's hit clutch shots to win the Sixers games in the past, he had incredible scoring performances in the past that really helped his his team win as well. And overall, Harden is not only looking to facilitate out there, but he's also doing a phenomenal job at scoring and picking up his team where his team really needs it the most, which is a complete 180 from what Harden was able to do during the regular season this year and during the playoffs last year. Now, the next factor that I want to touch upon has to be the play of Tyrese Maxey. Now, Maxey was always a guy during the regular season and during the playoffs that's been playing really well, even in the past. But when you look at what he was able to do this season, and especially during this series versus Celtics, Maxey has really been a huge boost for Philadelphia. He's the type of guy that has the capability of putting up 30 plus points on any given night, and that's something that we've really seen in this series. Maxey is a tremendous scorer. He has a really nice ability to play off ball and spread the court out effectively for James Harden and Joel Embiid, but also when he's playing with a bench unit, he does a really nice job at creating for himself as well. Whether you talk about that 3-point area, even sometimes that mid-range area, and even has a really nice ability to drive all the way to the basket and finish. The great thing about Maxey is not only does he have the ability to put up a ton of points, but he also does it in the most part in a very efficient and effective manner. And just having extra guys on your roster like that to put alongside your main two stars in Embiid and Harden just make your team that much more dangerous, and if 3 of your guys are able to have incredible scoring nights, it just makes your team basically impossible to defeat. And I think we've really seen that a couple of different games in this series versus Celtics. So I think if James Harden can continue to play as well as he has been throughout the most part of this series, and Tyrese Maxey can play really well, and Joel Embiid can continue to play as well as he has been during the series, I do think the Sixers actually have a great chance to win this matchup versus Celtics. And I think this matchup between the Celtics and the Sixers is really going to be the determining factor on who ends up making it to the NBA Finals. I think the Miami Heat are a pretty good team. It's been pretty crazy how much Erik Spoelstra was able to get out of that roster, which in my opinion isn't necessarily the most talented, but at the end of the day, when you talk about the Eastern Conference Finals, whether you talk about the Boston Celtics or the Sixers, I think either one of those teams would have a relatively easy time with the Heat, and at the end of the day, even if it's not the easiest, I do think either one of those teams would beat the Heat. But at this point, I do think it looks very good that the Sixers could actually win this playoff series against the Celtics. They're going back into Philadelphia, they have their home court advantage, and if their guys could step up, I do think they have a really good chance to close out the series in 6 games, which is definitely something that I personally didn't expect going into the series. But of course, it isn't going to be easy. The Celtics are clearly a really good team, and they're going to have a lot of desperation in Game 6, so it's going to be on the Sixers to not only keep up with the Celtics, but also to eventually take the lead and eventually win that game in Philadelphia. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening with the Sixers in not only this series, but in future series if they're able to make it out of here. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Sixers are a much better team than a lot of people expected going into the playoffs, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.